Hey everyone, welcome to FineScale Modeler Weekly.
That's right, we're going to open the show by opening some kits.
Starting with 1/48 scale Wildcats, the first one up is Eduard's FM2 Wildcat.
Equipped with a more powerful engine and a taller vertical tail to counteract the extra torque, this General Motors built FM2 was specifically designed to operate on smaller escort carriers.
So we looked at the initial Eduard Wildcat, the F4, F3, in a new product rundown in late 2022. You can check out that at the link in the description.
The cockpit and landing gear parts are the same here, as are the horizontal stabilizers. The FM2's taller rudder was included on the sprue in the original kit.
The rudder matches the taller vertical tail on the new fuselage. Surface detail is the extremely fine rivets and panel lines we've come to expect from Eduard. The wing is different here also, with the folding lines engraved and the openings for the FM2's 4 guns. Also new is the engine, with parts to represent the Wright R1820-56 Cyclone. A new cowl, optional props, 2 styles of rockets, instrument panel, and seat armor.
The clear parts match the previous release and offer multiple windshield and canopy options. Masks are provided, and this Profipack kit includes photo-etched metal for the cockpit.
Typical of Eduard, the decal sheet offers stencils and options for 10 aircraft. A tri-color camo bird from VC-10 aboard USS Gambier Bay in August 1944. An overall sea blue FM2 from VC-4 on USS White Plains, also in August 1944. A Wildcat and Atlantic camouflage from VC-69 on USS Guadalcanal in mid-1944. A brightly striped sea blue plane from VC-8 aboard USS Nahenta Bay in August 1945. A VC-80 fighter on USS Manila Bay in autumn 1944. Another Atlantic scheme-wearing FM2 from VC-13 aboard USS Tripoli. A sea blue Wildcat with 4-leaf clovers on the tail and wings from VC-93 aboard USS Petroff Bay in spring 1945. Another tricolor FM2 from VC-14 on USS Hoggett Bay in November 1944. A sea blue fighter from VC-27 on USS Savo Island in January 1945. And a British Fleet Air Arm number 881 Squadron Wildcat Mark VI on HMS Pursuer in August 1944.
When Tamiya released its 1/48th scale F4F4 in 1994, modelers loved it and hoped it would yield other versions.
To the surprise of many, it didn't, until now with the release of this FM1/Martlet Mark V.
Since the FM1 was essentially identical to the Grumman F4F4, many of the parts matched the original, including the fuselage, engine and cockpit, cowl, stabilizers, landing gear, and clear parts.
The wings have been modified because one of the changes for the FM1 was to reduce the number of guns from 6 to 4. Also new here is a nicely sculpted pilot, something the original kit didn't provide.
The decals provide cockpit instrument faces, stencils, and markings for 3 aircraft: a Royal Navy Martlet Mark V aboard HMS Tracker at Normandy in June 1944, an Atlantic Service camouflage aircraft from VC-58 aboard USS Guadalcanal in January 1944, and one in 3-color camo from VC-33 aboard USS Nassau in September 1943.
These releases show just how great a time it is to be a modeler, especially if you like Wildcats. And I mean, who doesn't like Wildcats? It's a pretty little fighter.
Next, something a bit different.
Yep, and it stands to reason that Korean Manufacturer Academy would be the one to bring us a 1/24 scale Hyundai Porter II.
This small truck is extensively used and is the best-selling vehicle in South Korea, or so says Wikipedia.
This kit represents the current body style with a sharply molded shell and separate rear wall, bumper, and aerodynamic roof fairing molded in white.
The shell surrounds the platform-style interior with detailed sides, rear wall, and seats, roof liner, and dash.
That all sits atop a frame molded with the rear leaf springs, cross members and front suspension, a curbside-style partial engine, exhausts, fuel tank, and drivetrain. The plastic wheels fit 2 different styles of tire for the front and back.
This kit models the box truck version of the Porter, with the cargo section supplied in separate plates. Crystal clear plastic supplies the windshield and cab windows, 2 styles of headlight lenses, and even optional rain guards for the doors. Clear orange and clear red plastic give the markers indicators and taillights.
The decals provide dash displays, vehicle badging and striping, and metallic trim on the cargo box doors.
This looks fun, and while the basic truck is white, it would be fun to dress it up in colorful livery.
Yeah, can you imagine having Kendra Bell trucking on the side of it? That would look, have some fun, lots of colorful stripes.
That would be pretty fun.
Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force launched a new class of frigates in 2022.
So it stands to reason that Tamiya would be the first to produce a 1/700th scale kit of the first in the class FFM Mogami.
A relatively small ship, the hull is about 7.5 inches in scale. The waterline halves sandwich the rear helicopter and forward decks. The rest of the stealthy superstructure, including the bridge, hangar doors, upper deck, and interior, mast, and upper deck are designed to click into place without glue.
Small details like antennas and guns are petite for the scale, and an SH-60L Seahawk with optional folded or deployed rotors can be fitted on the rear deck. Decals and painting diagrams give the markings for the Mogami, including draft markers, hull numbers, and deck stripes.
Produced in typical Tamiya fashion, this should be a quick build with minimal fuss.
Italeri first kitted the Humvee or HMMWV M1036 tow carrier in 1987.
Since then, the kit has been re-released multiple times, sometimes with new parts for different versions.
With this 1/35th scale M1036, Italeri fixes one of the biggest gripes about the kit, the hard plastic tires.
Instead, the kit features one-part hubs that are wrapped with new rubber tires.
The rest of the kit appears to be unchanged with the frame and curbside engine, suspension, drivetrain, and interior. The body has a separate hood, sides, doors, windshield, and tailgate. The upper turret and tow missile system fits on the roof. Individual clear frames fit the windscreen and doors.
Cartograph decals give markings for a pair of Army Desert Storm Humvees, an 82nd Airborne vehicle in overall desert camo, and a 24th Infantry Division M1036 in NATO camo.
It's good to see this 35-year-old kit being given new relevance with new parts.
In a move that should help some of these kits be available again, Academy is reproducing some of the highlights from Minicraft's catalog,
including the 1/48th scale T-34 Mentor, seen here as the B version used by the Navy for training.
Now, we looked at the original Mentor in a new product rundown, and Ted Horn built it for a workbench review.
You can see links to both of those in the description.
In addition to the well-molded parts, this kit includes decals with markings for 2 VT5 Training Squadron T-34Bs in sharp orange and white, and an overall yellow trainer from VT1.
Minicraft's 1/144th scale C-130 kits date to 2006, and the first stretched C-130J30 was released in 2015.
Now it's available from Academy, with the longer fuselage halves and floors marked with recessed panel lines, wings and fuel tanks, and the upgraded engines with 6-blade props, as well as the posable ramp.
The decals provide windows and stencils and markings for several Hercules, one of several from the U.S. Air Force 36th Airlift Squadron at Yokota AFB in 2023, another from the 61st Airlift Squadron at Little Rock Air Force Base wearing a heritage scheme, 4 airframes from the South Korean Air Force 251st Airlift Squadron, 3 aircraft from the Royal Air Force No. 47 Squadron, and options for one of 12 C-130J30s from the Royal Australian Air Force No. 37 Squadron.
That's a lot of options.
So many options.
Options, and
more options.
It's great to see these kits get a new lease on life.
Look for reviews of the Porter II and Mogami at FineScale.com,
where there is so much else to check out, including how-to videos, snapshots, galleries from shows, all kinds of stuff.
And we update the website daily, so don't forget to check us out.
FineScale Modeler Weekly, brought to you by Hobby Zone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard-to-find hobby tools, and aftermarket modeling needs.
A couple of months ago, I came to you and said we were going to talk about scissors. And some of you were like, that's not interesting at all, Tim. And I disagree. Scissors were, I thought, a great topic. I still think they were a great topic. Well, I'm back now to talk to you about clamps. Why? Because they're useful. They're useful at your workbench. So let's start off here. What's the definition clamp. If I had been better about this, I would have looked this up earlier. But meh, you know what, whatever. The definition of clamp, according to Merriam-Webster, is a device designed to bind or constrict or to press two or more parts together so as to hold them firmly. I'm going to go down here to definition 2. Any of various instruments or appliances having parts brought together for holding or compressing something. I'm going to go with that one. Why? Because some of the things that we use as clamps in modeling aren't necessarily designed as clamps. And I'm going to start off with a simple clamp, the T-pin. That's right, this little guy right there, T-pin. It's a clamp. We'll get back to it, but I'm telling you, it can be used as a clamp. Another thing that we use in modeling, rubber bands. You can buy them in big bags. That's how I like to buy them, with a variety of sizes and tensions. Then, if you're still MacGyvering it, these binder clips. Binder clips are very useful just to have around in case maybe the other clamps that you're using are all being used for something, and well, you can use a binder clip in a pinch. Then we start getting into basically what is a binder clip designed for hobbyists. This is a micro spring clip. What's kind of nice about this is it has the same sort of tension that a binder clip has, nicer handle, but then it's got these little feet up here that sort of adjust to whatever you're clamping together. We'll get deeper into these in a second. Then I think everybody in modeling, unless you're very new, is used to seeing the plastic clamp. I call them friction clamps for how they're designed, so you can adjust to the size of whatever it is you're clamping. And then this little thing here, you push it just enough so that that jaw doesn't move anymore, and it just holds the parts that you're clamping together in place. Very useful. It comes in a couple of sizes. I think this one's 3.5 inches. You can get them up to 6.5, maybe 7 inches, something like that. When we're getting a little bit more serious about something that we're clamping, you can always move to a hobby-sized bar clamp. Now these clamp down. What you do is you just pull this little trigger here, and you can close the jaws. If you need to loosen it, there's usually some sort of mechanism, a button, that you can loosen the mechanism on the inside of the clamp to open it up, and then you can go ahead and squeeze that back down. These are really useful and nice. Then, C-clamps. A little bit more specialized and useful for smaller, clamping smaller pieces together, usually flat. Reasonably priced, and you can get them at just about any hardware store. And then finally, when you really need to clamp something and persuade it to stay in place, you can go to something like this, a hand clamp, where it ratchets down, and then use that trigger to open it up. So, how would you use these different kinds of clamps in modeling? So what is this ugly thing? Well, this is my pin cushion. It has been around for a long time. But I do want to just briefly touch on the usefulness of pins. Now, not really something that you necessarily see used for plastic models very often, but they are used quite a bit in wooden modeling, particularly wooden model ships. They're useful for pinning. You know, you can put a pin into the wood, put down a part, a plank, if you will, glue it down, and then put another plank next to it, and then put another pin on the opposite side, and push those planks together. You can also actually use the pin and push it through a plank, although that does tend to leave an ugly hole in your plank. But in any case, pins can be useful for a variety of clamping needs for certain kinds of models. Wood, again, you might also use them for doing dioramas and those sorts of things. So anyway, don't ever just discount the pins. It might not be a bad idea for you to have some T-pins around just because they are useful at the workbench. Moving on. You probably recognize this fuselage from any number of FineScale Modeler videos. It's gone through a lot for us and it's gonna go through more. But in this case, it's just nice and easy to use to show how you can use a rubber band as a clamp. Now, those of you who've seen previous videos that we did about using rubber bands, you'll recognize that scarring there. But rubber band, simple clamp. You got two parts, you need them to stay together, real easy to use. And what's nice about using a rubber band is that they're flexible, right? So they shape to the shape of the parts that you are trying to hold together. There are some drawbacks to rubber bands and some things that you need to be careful of when you're using them. Again, see that scarring there? You don't want glue getting out underneath those rubber bands. But they can be very useful. For instance, take a look at how I use them on this TIE Fighter build that I did a few weeks ago. In this instance, using those rubber bands made sense. I had tried to use a couple of different kinds of clamps, but they just wouldn't work because of the contours. So bringing those rubber bands in, wrapping them around there, they just did the job exactly as I needed it to be done. So rubber bands are useful. You can pick them up from just about anywhere. I like to pick up a big bag that has an assortment of, as you can see, an assortment of sizes and tensions in that bag, and they're cheap. So they're just good to have around at your workbench. Next up, binder clips. Now, like rubber bands, it's just basic office equipment, right? You can find them practically anywhere. They come in a number of sizes from small or even smaller than this to medium to large to even extra large. However, they are a bit limited in what they can do. I find that they are best used on reasonably flat and parallel surfaces because on something like this, they tend to just sort of slip off, right? Anything rounded like that. So their mouths are limited in what they can, it's quite the squeeze, they can get to, and as I just demonstrated, they do have quite the biting power. So you need to be careful with them so that they don't deform your part, right? And they squeeze so much that there's some sort of deformation along the seam. So you don't want that. But they can be useful in a pinch and used in very specific cases. So the micro spring clamps are very much like binder clips, except that they are, well, in this case, designed more specifically for hobby usage. The other thing is that the spring in here isn't nearly as strong as what the binder clip is, and the jaws open a bit wider. Like the binder clips, they're best used on reasonably flat and parallel surfaces, simply because, again, when you've got an area that's shaped, let's say like the nose of this fuselage, they can slip off. And while it ain't slipping right now, it could. It's nice that these have these tilting feet and they've got some rubber pads there, but I have had these guys over the course of time just squeeze and squeeze, and then suddenly you'll be working on something else and you hear click, and here comes a clamp flying at you. So I prefer to use them again on surfaces that are, you know, a shallow curve isn't bad, but mostly parallel. That doesn't, you know, really cause those jaws to be too terribly open. The other thing about these is that, and I'm sure there's a formula, a mathematical formula about it, but I think after a certain point, if these jaws are open too wide, the amount of pressure that they're actually putting down on the parts is probably not as much as if it's, say, only half as wide. So anyway, that's just my uneducated guess on the mathematical side of things. But practically, that's how I like to use these micro clamps. Oh, now we get into more of the clamps that you associate with the hobby, these classic plastic, as I said earlier, what I like to call friction clamps. So you can get them in a couple of lengths. These are 3.5 inch. You can get them up to, I think, 6.5 or 7 inches, maybe a little bit longer. But basically, they have 3 parts, this L shape, the moving jaw, and then this little locking mechanism down here. And you can basically, they'll come out of the package like this. You just unlock it by pulling this little locking mechanism down. You can move the jaw then to wherever you need it for clamping. And then once you're there, you just move that little locking mechanism, which is friction operated, back, and then it locks the jaw in place. So, for instance, let's say we were clamping these 2 fuselage halves together. This would be a great place to use something like this clamp. We clamp down, we come back, we use that to lock it in place, and now those pieces will be there. I have 6 or 8 of these at the workbench because, well, you don't want it just there. You might need one of them back here too. Whoops! That demonstrates an issue with these that, again, these clamps all have certain uses, right? And because of that tapering, it doesn't necessarily work so great back here. But on, again, places where you can get them parallel so that they can have purchase, and then you can just lock it in place, and there it goes. So a couple of drawbacks with these clamps. As you saw earlier, if there's this taper, then there's a potential that you don't really have good purchase with the clamp and it can slide out. Now, if you're careful enough with it, you can angle it in there and lock it in and it'll do the job. But you might use a rubber band instead of a clamp like this. Another thing that you want to be careful of is remember that these are plastic. So if your seam is running across the clamp, you don't want any of that glue to be out and touching this clamp because it will, if it's firmly against your part, it could glue the parts together to your model. Otherwise, you're just going to, get plastic cement on here and it could mar your clamp up, which could, in theory, affect its operation. One of the more fun clamps on my workbench is this bar clamp. Now, it operates similar to what the previous clamp did, the friction clamp, except that instead of you just pushing the jaws together and then locking it, it's got this little trigger down here that helps you close up the clamp and then squeeze those parts together. Then you can release them with a little trigger mechanism like that one. So similar to the friction clamp, you just kind of get this thing going and then you clamp it down. Now, this can be used to really persuade parts to stay together. Be sure, again, much like the jaw clamps, you don't want to press too hard. You just want to get your parts together so that everything is nice and touching. Do not crank down so hard that you deform your parts, because with this kind of clamp, it's really a possibility to do. And I'm not going to break our fuselage just to show you. I'm not going to do that. Speaking of persuading parts to stay together, you can get a C-clamp in a number of different sizes, appropriate for modeling, from your local hardware store. This is just one of 4 C-clamps that I have at my workbench, and what I use these primarily for is laminating parts that aren't particularly big, right? Definitely not wider than what the jaw can accommodate, but this can really be used to persuade a couple of parts to stay together and stay together tightly. The big thing that you want to be careful of when using a C-clamp like this, or any clamp that you can, again, really clamp down, distortion is one, but with this in particular, you don't want these seats here to mar the part that you are clamping together. So you just make sure that you clamp it down as tightly as you want without it then leaving an impression in the part. So if you're doing wood or even plastic, then you want to make sure that you just don't distort or damage the part as you're clamping it. But this is going to definitely keep those parts together as tightly as you want them. Now this is the Micro Spring Clamps biggest brother. Well, maybe it's not its biggest brother, but the biggest brother that I've got on my workbench is this hand clamp. And yeah, it, like the Micro Spring Clamp, it's got its handles back here. It has these little feet up here on the jaw that will adjust to the part in between. And then this ratchet mechanism. And you can just crank that down all the way, as hard as you want. And then you can release it with that trigger. Now, you can see here where I was using one of these clamps to hold the rear end of a horse, Clydesdale in fact, together. Because it just needed serious persuading. And you can see a couple of the little brothers up there on the head to keep the head together too. That's where, something like this is really useful. When you've got a thick part that just, you can't hold it together. None of the other clamps in your arsenal are really doing it. You need something that's bigger than those Micro Spring Clamps that has some adjustability. Rubber bands aren't doing it. So you come in with a hand clamp like this, crank it down, and you let all of that sit and cure, and then you come back and that horse stays together. So these are some of the clamps, and yes, I know some of you are going to come in and go, pins aren't clamps, and I'm not changing my mind. They can be used as clamps. So these are some of the clamps that I have at my workbench, and I find clamps a very useful item. And I think you will, if you don't have any, I think you will too.
Well, Tim, thanks for that tooling around. That was some good pressing information.
Oh! It'll do in a pinch.
Ah, very good.
Oh no, it's spreading. The punnery is spreading. It's no good. Anyway,
yes.
What we want to talk today a little bit about is some of the conversations that we've had in the past, and that's about not getting discouraged.
Right.
There was a Facebook post to our feed a while back during BAM, where one of our followers, I think, got a little bit discouraged, seeing all of the models that were coming in, and felt like they had no chance that they could, win the contest. And I think a lot of modelers sometimes feel that way. And at least from our perspective with BAM, it's more about sharing the hobby and the model. Yes, of course, there's a contest aspect to it, there's a judging aspect to it, and there's this chance of getting on the cover of the magazine and, having a feature story about about your model and part of the gallery and that sort of stuff too. But we also regularly share reader gallery photos where people just send in photos and we publish them either online or in the magazine, right? And it's more about just showing what it is that you're working on. And that's really where we come from on it, is like, just show us. To me, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's got a bunch of glue seams and all sorts of other stuff. If it's like, if that suddenly is, not suddenly, but if that's the best model that you've ever done, oh my God, I want to be able to celebrate with you on that. I mean,
Right.
if you're happy about that, that's great.
Right, and discouraging that kind of stuff is just a way of driving people away from doing what they enjoy doing and doing what we enjoy doing.
Right.
So, I mean, you and I have joked before about going to certain shows. MMSI is a good example where all I want to do is chuck my tools away and give up because I can't build to that level. But then I think, you know what? I'm happy doing where I'm at.
Right.
And I hope that my goal is to always make the next model better than the last one and not get discouraged because of what I've gotten to at this point. So.
Yeah, and I think discouragement is a natural thing. I think that's just something that we all like go through those ups and downs, you know, where you don't even feel like you want to build a model. It's just like, I'm done. I don't want to do this for a while. And taking time away and do something else is fine too. But I think, you know, once you get through the natural process of it, I think part of it is also learning to accept your style.
Right.
Right?
Yes, definitely.
My style of building is not your style of building. We may build similarly, right?
Right.
But, you know, I don't do things the same way that you do them. And my models, even if we both built TIE fighters, those TIE fighters will, in the end, look somewhat different,
Right.
just because your modeling style is not my modeling style. And I think that's true of everybody. And there comes a certain point where you have to accept who you are as a modeler, right? And you know what things that you like to do and what things that you don't like to do. And there's no one else out there who can say, well, that's wrong.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to emulate the styles that you see. We'll use Mk.V as an example. I mean, he's a really good builder, and a lot of people sort of strive to replicate what he does. And that's fine, but find your own place in that, too. You don't have to build exactly the way he does or paint exactly the way he does to be a good modeler.
Exactly.
It's find what you're comfortable with, find the painting style that you like, the weathering style that you like. You know, we did both build an R2-D2, and they both looked really good, and they were both just slightly different from one another because we have a different way of doing certain things.
Yeah, and I mean, in that example, I mean, you were really getting into the weathering pencils at the time, and I wasn't. So, you know, the way that you weathered R2, you know, was very different from the way that I did, and I was going for a much cleaner, you know, look for him, where you were a little bit more of his. Not full blown Tatooine, but you know where he was
close to that. Yeah,
before the oil bath.
right.
Before the oil bath. But you know, I think the overall message here for you guys is to stay positive about what you're doing. You know, I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that the basic skills that we're looking for promoting, you know, is just a clean build.
Right.
Right. A clean build, and something that once you're ready for paint, you know, that's your blank canvas then, right? And then you can just finish to your heart's content.
Right. And I think the other thing I wanted to say is think about who you're building for. Are you building, ultimately you should be building for yourself because it's your model,
Yeah.
it's your creation. And if other people appreciate it, that's fine. If you take it to a contest and you win something, that's fine too. But that shouldn't be necessarily the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for you or me or whoever it is that's building it to be happy with that build.
I think that's a good point. The contest thing, you know, I'm not huge into contests. You know that. I do them from time to time. But what I try to keep in my head is that if I am entering at a contest, it's more of a support the contest.
Right.
I am putting a model on the table. If I get something, that's great. But it's more about being able to go there and see the people that maybe I've seen at other contests, you know, continue to be acquainted and reacquaint myself with those people, and then just learn, just talk the hobby. I mean, that's really the reason to go is, yeah, okay, you might win something, but it's more about showing, well, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
And then, you know, just being able to talk and share experiences. That's really what's cool about going to shows.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you know, the N&L side of things for the car guys, that's really where that whole thing came from, was like, let's take this competition sort of thing out of it and make it more about the camaraderie of model building.
And we're not taking anything away from
No.
the contest side of it.
Absolutely not.
If that's what you're looking for and that's what you want to do.
That's awesome.
And like Tim said, we both participate as much as anything to support the clubs holding the shows. But I like, as much as anything, if I have a model on the table and somebody asks me about it, how I did something, that's sort of as big a deal as winning anything.
Right, yeah.
Because it's like, okay, somebody else is appreciating what I've done or asking how I did something because they want to learn from it. And if I can explain to them and they get something out of it, that's a prize in itself.
Exactly, yeah. So what we would say is to those of you who are maybe feeling a little bit discouraged out there, that's totally natural. That's totally okay. But keep going. Keep coming back and doing your thing. And don't be comparing yourself to what somebody else has done. And we all do it, right? We all do it. Let's just be honest. We all do it. But don't take it so seriously on yourself. Just, be easy on yourself. Enjoy your hobby. And once you're done with that model, on to the next one. And recognize the things that maybe you would do differently and try them differently on the next one.
Keep learning.
That's right. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Yield other versions. Did I miss you?
No.
Oh, you.
Oh my God!
Sorry.
You were there.
you like side-eyed me, so I was like, I missed something, didn't I?
Try it again. Now I'm gonna mess with my line. I don't have anything smart to say.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I disagree then. I disagree now. Gosh darn it, I need to deliver that better. I'm sorry, Diane. We're like dogs that are distracted by squirrels. Previous. It's. Stop it! Jump in your head! Of where I was. Am I putting you to sleep, dude?
No.